The sun had not yet climbed high enough to burn away the mist that lay, like a faded veil, over the town. Dust rose lazily from the main street, curling in little spirals that caught the pale light. Wooden facades leaned with the memory of storms long past, and the wind carried the faint tang of sagebrush and pine from the hills beyond. She walked alone, her boots scuffing the dirt, a bundle held close to her chest. The air seemed to whisper at her shoulders, reminding her that she was now untethered, adrift on the edges of a world that had once seemed familiar. Her eyes traced the horizon where the mountains met the sky, the jagged peaks softened by distance. Her heart felt hollow, a wagon, while missing a spoke, turning in circles but never quite steady. Rejection had been a cold wind through her soul, her in-laws' harsh words still clinging to her skin, their disapproval etched in every curve of her jaw, every tightening of her chest. They had kicked her out with a casual cruelty, leaving her to gather the scattered pieces of a life she had thought secure. And yet, walking through that quiet town, she felt a pulse of something she hadn't dared name: possibility. Her fingers traced the seams of the bundle she carried. A few dresses, a notebook, a hand-stitched quilt. They were all that remained, yet somehow they felt enough. She had always been underestimated, her quiet strength overlooked, her resilience dismissed. But now, in the emptiness, she began to understand a truth she had not yet spoken aloud. The world had not ended. Perhaps in some quiet corner it was beginning again. It was there, in the tattered pages of a small, weathered newspaper she found at the corner general store, that she saw it: a log cabin for $5. The words were simple, almost a whisper: for sale, small cabin, heart of the pines, $5. Her breath caught, half disbelief, half a tentative spark. $5 was less than the cost of a loaf of bread, less than a night at the local inn. But it was hers if she chose to take it. And in that tiny, improbable number, she glimpsed something that had eluded her for too long: freedom. The town faded behind her as she approached the cabin, a squat wooden structure that leaned slightly, as if bowing under the weight of years. Its roof was worn, shingles missing in places, and the door creaked like a voice uncertain of welcome. Yet she saw it not as abandoned, but alive, a vessel for dreams, a space where she could rebuild, stitch by careful stitch, the life that had been unraveled. The wind rustled the surrounding pines, carrying a faint scent of earth and rain, and she imagined the mornings she would rise to the smell of wood smoke curling into pale skies. Perhaps, she thought, the cabin would be more than shelter. Perhaps it would become a sanctuary. That night, she lay on the thin mattress that came with the cabin, listening to the wind speak through the cracks in the walls. The sounds were not frightening, but intimate, as if the world itself was bending close to hear her thoughts. She thought of the lives she had left behind, the bitter words, the dismissive glances, the warmth she had been denied. And yet, in that silence, there was also hope, a quiet flame she had almost forgotten existed. She imagined the work that lay ahead: patching windows, lighting a fire that would not falter, tending the land, planting roots where none had taken hold. Every small task would be a reclaiming, a declaration that she would not be broken. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of something that had eluded her in her old life: possibility. The wind outside carried the faint hoot of an owl and the distant bark of a dog, ordinary sounds made extraordinary by the weight of her solitude. Her hands trembled as she signed the papers, her signature clumsy but certain. $5, a trifle for some, but a treasure for her. It was the seed of a life she had dared to imagine, fragile as winter grass beneath frost, yet stubborn in its insistence to grow. And as the candle flickered low, shadows dancing on the walls, she understood that the fire she carried within herself, quiet, steady, unyielding, had not gone out. It had merely been waiting for a place like this, a place to shine again. She would rise with the sun tomorrow, hands raw, heart cautious but awake, stepping into the life that was hers alone. The cabin, small and crooked, waited patiently for her to fill it with warmth, with work, with laughter. And in that waiting, there was a promise that even after rejection, even after heartbreak, life could be reshaped one careful, tender day at a time. The cabin greeted her each morning like an old friend, its wooden bones creaking softly in the wind, as if whispering encouragement. Light spilled through gaps in the walls, painting stripes across the floor, and she moved among them with a quiet reverence. Each day she rose with the sun, her hands raw from the small labor she had begun, and with each patch, each nail, each tender sweep of the broom, she felt herself stitching together a life she had thought irretrievably lost. The wind carried the scent of pine and distant rain, and she inhaled it deeply, as if drawing courage straight into her lungs. She started with the windows, replacing broken panes with shards of glass scavenged from the town junkyard. The work was slow, painstaking, but it was hers. The rhythm of hammer against wood, the scrape of sandpaper across splintered frames, became a quiet meditation. Evenings found her sitting by the small hearth, a thin flame flickering across her face, the notebook open on her lap. She wrote of memories that no longer haunted her, of dreams she dared not speak aloud, and of the faint stirrings of hope that now brushed her heart like the soft wings of a bird. Neighbors began to notice the slow transformation. A grizzled man, his face lined with years of sun and wind, would stop at the edge of her clearing and offer a tip, a word of advice, or a piece of salvaged wood. He spoke little, but the kindness in his eyes was a balm, and she welcomed it quietly, allowing herself a small smile in return. A curious child from a nearby town would wave from a distance, too shy to approach, yet bold enough to linger and watch her labor. Each acknowledgement, each simple gesture of recognition, felt like sunlight breaking through overcast skies. The garden came next, a modest plot behind the cabin. She dug her hands into the earth, planting seeds that promised life in their own slow, stubborn way. Mint and thyme, sunflowers that would tilt their golden faces toward the sky, and hardy vegetables that would sustain her through the months. Every sprout that broke through the soil was a tiny victory, proof that resilience could take root even in the most neglected places. And each evening, as she knelt to water them, the wind carrying the distant calls of birds and the low hum of the forest, she felt herself growing alongside them. In the quiet hours, she reflected on what had brought her here. The in-laws' cold dismissal, the first man's shallow rejection, the sense that she had been discarded. It all lingered like smoke at the edges of her mind. But the smoke was no longer choking her. She had learned to let it curl away on its own, to watch it drift and dissipate without clutching at it in fear or anger. The cabin, imperfect and crooked, had become a sanctuary not only of wood and stone, but of spirit. Here, she was free to make choices, to honor herself, to cultivate kindness both for herself and for those who crossed her path. Evenings were her favorite, when the sun sank behind the ridges and painted the sky in hues of amber and rose. She would sit on the porch, cup of tea in hand, and watch the shadows lengthen across the land. Sometimes the neighbor would join her, sitting a respectful distance away, sharing stories of seasons past, of storms weathered, of quiet moments like this. The world was vast, and its sorrows still whispered, but here, in the gentle hush of twilight, there was solace. There was peace. The cabin's transformation was mirrored in her own. She found joy in small victories. The first fire she built without choking on smoke. The first meal she cooked from her garden. The first night she slept without fear or longing. Each accomplishment, humble though it might be, was a reclamation of agency, a declaration that she would no longer be defined by the shadows of others' cruelty. And in the quiet reflection of the pond near her cabin, she sometimes caught a glimpse of herself. Eyes steady, shoulders relaxed, heart cautiously open. And for the first time in many months, she recognized the woman she had always been beneath the judgments and heartbreak. And yet, there was more than labor in her days. She began to notice the subtle details of the world around her. The way sunlight filtered through the trees and soft lattices, the delicate balance of birds alighting on the fence posts, the low murmur of the river threading through the valley like a ribbon of silver. She walked among these rhythms, letting them sink into her bones, and felt a quiet sense of belonging, a deep resonance with the land that mirrored the growing steadiness in her own heart. The cabin, once a forgotten structure with peeling paint and sagging roof, began to breathe. Smoke curled reliably from the chimney, flowers swayed in the breeze, and the walls, patched and polished with care, held the warmth of a life reclaimed. And in this slow, patient unfolding, she began to understand a truth she had known only in fragments. That love for oneself, nurtured quietly and consistently, could be more enduring than any approval she had once sought from others. As night fell, she lingered on the porch, notebook resting on her lap, and allowed herself a tentative smile. The days had been long, the work unending, but there was pride in each mark she left, each corner she repaired. Somewhere, in the deep hush of the valley, the world seemed to acknowledge her efforts, offering stars scattered across the sky as witnesses to her quiet triumph. And in the solitude, she realized that she was no longer alone. She was accompanied by the pulse of her own courage, the gentle rhythm of the land, and the promise of life yet to come. The cabin had become more than shelter. It was a living testament to resilience and quiet beauty. And though she did not yet know what the future held, she felt, deep in the marrow of her bones, that she was ready to meet it. Somewhere beyond the ridges, someone might see her, not as broken, but as brave, and the thought, soft as a sigh, made her heart lift like a sail catching wind.